our intention was really at the time to be like a boutique title company. We were, we knew we could pull a few clients, and it kind of just really grew in a matter of months beyond our expectations.
Yeah.
So there has to be that disclosure.
Right.
If there's that disclosure, we can do them, back to back. That's not an issue. If you as the investor stop paying, not saying you, I'm just saying as an investor,
Right.
stop making that payment on their mortgage, well, it affects their credit.
Yeah.
I mean, they're probably not in good credit state as it
begin with.
is,
Right.
but it does affect their credit, among other things.
Welcome back to the Investor Unite podcast, where we talk all things real estate, business, and entrepreneurship.
If you are looking to ignite real estate investing, then join us on Investors Unite. And on today's podcast, we have a very knowledgeable guest, very experienced in many different fields of real estate. So I'm very excited to introduce you to Brian Zulli. He is not only an attorney, also co-owner of...
You got it?
Okay, perfect. Capstone Land Transfer, really major title company in Central PA. I don't know if it's the biggest, but it's definitely up there.
I don't know about that, but yeah,
it's definitely up
we
there.
try to provide great service. So,
you guys do. We pretty much close all our deals through them. Very knowledgeable people, very helpful. And he is here to also instruct us, or educate us, I should say, on all the new restrictions that are coming to investing and wholesaling, I should say, specifically in PA. So that's something that we're looking to dive a little bit deeper into. But first, do you want to do like a little introduction of yourself? Tell us like where you grew up, how you got into any of this real estate that you do, what it's like being an attorney.
Yeah, we can walk through that. Grew up in Central PA, outside of Hummelstown, and been pretty much went to school in the area, Shippensburg University. So we stayed local for college and ended up going to law school here at Widener.
Nice.
Widener has two campuses, one here in Harrisburg and also down in Delaware. Okay. And, just kind of stayed local. Saved a couple bucks while I was in law school by living at home and, loved the area. Always loved real estate. My father, he's retired now, but was a local attorney for many years. Okay. And
is that truly like your inspiration of getting into what you do?
It was. My uncle's an attorney. My godfather who passed away, he was an attorney. My father was an attorney.
Just runs in the family.
It kind of was like, hey, I think I'm going to do this thing. Yeah. And, you kind of sometimes don't know what you're getting into until you're there. But title insurance, I knew nothing about until I bought my first house with my wife. And they don't teach you any of that in law school. And just kind of, loved real estate and kind of fell into it to some extent. So,
Gotcha. And you actually knew my father growing up, which is very coincidental.
I
that
did.
I'm running into you now.
Believe it or not, we were in Boy Scouts together back in the day, back in Middletown. And we actually almost did a deal with him and you, right?
Almost.
And
we explained that entire story.
Did you go through that
podcast.
story? Because that's I tell everyone, no one realizes real estate, you can write a book about the experiences that you have. So
if we took all the podcasts and just condensed our stories, that'd be like a 300-page book.
It really would be.
It really would. I keep telling everyone I'm going to do it someday, but
you think so?
I'd probably not.
Yeah, that's a lot of work writing a book.
It is.
That's a huge task.
Yeah.
But but real estate's a lot of fun. Background wise, I didn't start in real estate. I actually started in the district attorney's office during law school. Okay. Did a lot of trial work and things like that. I worked in the district attorney's office for a while. My wife is an attorney as well, but she was in a different district attorney's office.
Okay.
And
is that how you ended up meeting?
Well, we actually met in law school. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we met in law school, and like I said, I was trying to save a few bucks when by living at home and going to school.
Yeah.
And that, obviously I met my wife and we got married. I was still at a year of law school left. So there, I kind of went out the window saving a few bucks, but it was worth it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So as far as, I worked in the DA's office for a while. We had our first child. And I was like, hey, I need to make a few more bucks because DA's office is incredible experience. Loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
But you don't really make that much money doing it.
Okay.
So So she decided to stay home when we had our first child, and I was like, hey, I need to go into private practice. And so ended up in private practice doing a lot of litigation, like real estate litigation, insurance defense litigation, mostly smash bang, my neck hurts type of thing.
Okay.
And started doing some real estate as well.
Yeah.
So I started doing settlements, representing people in transactional work. And next thing you know, there was an opportunity to work at Conestoga Title Insurance Company, which is a small regional title insurance underwriter.
Yeah.
And they're located in Lancaster.
Okay.
And they're still around today. They're in 15 or 18 states, something like that.
Nice.
So I went to work for them for a while. Ended up, my boss there ended up leaving to start a title insurance company, an agency, as opposed to the underwriter.
Yeah.
So an underwriter in title insurance is like an Allstate or a State Farm when you look at car insurance or home insurance.
Yeah.
Okay.
The title agencies such as Capstone, is the broker, so to speak, or the agent that's representing an Allstate or a State Farm.
Right.
Just not known as well.
Okay.
People really don't know what title insurance is. Frankly,
It's true.
I didn't until as I mentioned earlier, until I handled my first or bought my first house.
Yeah.
My dad handled the transaction, and I'm like, hey, what's this $1,400 fee or whatever it was at the
Yeah.
time? And he's like, well, it's title insurance, and this is what it does. It pays for the services and
Mhm.
covers, make sure you actually own your property.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, interesting. And that's kind of, when I was in private practice, kind of learned to do that, handle settlements.
Yep.
Okay.
He taught me a few things. And
Nice. Now, was any of your family involved in real estate whatsoever?
my dad did a few flips with a guy. He was, my dad handled the transactional side of it, handled the
Okay.
money, and then he had somebody that was very proficient in building. So
Handyman.
a handyman guy. So he did the fixing, so they partnered on a few transactions,
Okay.
but not really.
Yeah. So he didn't have too much to teach you, just getting into it.
He taught me the real estate stuff from the legal side, from the
Right.
transactional work and handling the settlements, but not so much on that end. So
Okay.
it was just something for some reason, I was always enjoyed. I was kind of
Mhm.
drawn to it,
Yeah.
probably like you guys were.
Yeah.
Yeah, since a
Um,
very young age.
Yeah,
we-
really?
Yeah.
How did you start?
Middle school is when
Okay.
I first started getting intrigued with it. And it was honestly just through watching TV shows like $1 Million Listings.
Mhm.
Then I found out what an agent was and then a broker. And just going through there, there's a point in time where growing up, I've told the story a couple times, so I'll try to keep it short.
Mhm.
Growing up, though, one thing that my family and we always did on Saturdays and Sundays is we would go for a walk in a new neighborhood. Typically, there's new construction going on, so we would
Oh,
break
wow.
into these new construction homes and try to figure out the floor plan and be like, is that the kitchen? Is this the living room, the dining room?
Don't break in though.
I don't recommend it, but it's something cool to do, right? It was quite the experience for myself, and I loved doing it. So from there, I kind of grew a passion for just houses as a whole, the design of them, the architecture behind it, and I was always a very money stingy kid. I
Mhm.
wanted to know everything about it. My grandma, the one that you actually know, she taught me a lot about finances growing up, so I was very grateful
Wow.
for that. So I kind of combined those two later on. Also, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was either 15 or 16. I was really a little bit young.
You're ahead of the curve.
I was
there,
trying my
yeah,
best,
yeah.
right? And then that's when I learned okay, I want to be an investor. So then I
Mhm.
started looking into actually being a real estate investor and how to get into that. And I did do 1 year of college afterwards. I just had fun there, not gonna
Mhm.
lie. And then,
Right.
it was an experience for sure. Came back, worked a little bit, had a girlfriend at the time, and I wanted to get back into it. And I knew about wholesaling, so I was like, I ended up getting a property under contract, ended up falling through. But from that experience, then it really just sparked my interest again. So I got back into it. Found out that Stephanie was an agent at the time, so I was like, we grew up together. We went to the same
Oh,
school.
did you really? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, we've
Alright.
known each other since first grade.
Oh, no
Long
way.
time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Had our first jobs together, everything like that. So I was like, would
That
you
is
mind?
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's full circle. It's insane. But
is.
it's like, do you mind showing me this one property on the MLS? It's listed as a single family. I think it's a possible 3-unit. And I saw that she was also doing her first fix and flip at the time. So I was
Mhm.
like, oh, you're doing exactly what I want to get into.
No way.
Yeah, so I reached out to her. She went and showed me. And then while we were there, we were just discussing, throwing ideas off of each other back and forth. She was like, would you want to partner up possibly, see if this is an opportunity for us. So I was like, sure. So
Mhm.
next couple of days she was like writing all this stuff down. Like, this is everything that I need in a partner. This is what I lack. This is my strong suits. I was not ready for that. I was like, okay. I was like, we have good chemistry already. I've known you my entire life. You're a trustworthy person. I was like, this is what I can bring to the table. And pretty much we just aligned really well. So that's where,
Yeah, that's fantastic. Usually, I mean, you guys are kind of way ahead of the curve because just being able to lay that out and know what your strengths and weaknesses are. I think it's taken me, I still don't know, like if I'm really, I mean, I know what my strengths are, but
Mhm.
I think it's taken me this long to figure out, hey, really don't want to admit that this is my weakness,
Right.
but
That's the hard part.
it's pretty
Yeah.
impressive that you guys figured that out.
Thank you. You
So,
just
Yeah,
gotta kill
appreciate
the
it.
pride sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
It's like,
do
what
have
do
to.
what do I suck
Yeah,
at?
ego
you know?
doesn't pay. So
not at all.
No, yeah.
So
Yeah.
from there, I mean, yeah, we just joined the LLC and then started wholesaling, fix and flipping innovations. Did our first buy and hold of May of last year.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, we're
The rest
growing.
is
We
history.
started this, met
Yeah.
these two wonderful gentlemen behind the
Yeah,
camera.
these guys know what they're doing.
They
Yeah,
do.
it's
No,
pretty
they're
awesome.
great people. So here we are. I mean,
Wow.
we love to just try to educate everyone like ourselves. I know that if I was younger, I'd love to listen to a podcast like this and have all the different experiences of different investors like coming in, asking questions that people want to know and
Mhm.
just learning as much as possible.
That's awesome. Yeah, um, the real estate bug. Once you get it, it's hard to get out.
It
So
really
it's,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I want to know, how did you go about with starting your own title company and partnering with Ryan?
Ryan and
Yeah.
Jolene. Yeah. So it evolved. So I kind of started a title insurance company. I was there for a couple years, and my boss ended up leaving. I took his position. I was running underwriting and claims, and frankly, I was learning how to do it on the fly.
Mhm.
Like there was so much to know and learn. I mean, I only had a few years experience, so it was an incredible opportunity. And then a local title agency came knocking, and I ended up going to work for them for 7 years. And they're still around today, still very reputable,
Mhm.
good company. And it got to the point where, hey, I couldn't really climb anymore there.
Yeah.
And two individuals came knocking. At the time, it was Caldwell Banker. I ended up partnering with them in 2011.
Okay.
I ran their title company. We were partners in the real estate brokerage as well. We ended up selling the company. We built it. We had 11 offices on the real estate brokerage side.
Wow.
That's impressive.
Approximately 340, 350 agents, about that.
Oh my goodness.
And the parent company came in and bought it. And we were a franchise, and franchisor said, "Hey, we're looking to grow market share," and so we ended up selling to them in 2014.
Cool.
Wow.
Do you remember what the multiple was that you sold at?
I don't know exactly. I mean, so the multiples are always good. It's 3x, 4x, something like that. But
Right.
Mhm.
it's always, there's the big component of the buyouts are usually like an earnout scenario. Because frankly,
Okay.
in our business, if you don't keep the business, if you don't keep the agents, if you don't keep the title business, I mean, you're really not buying anything. So.
Right.
Right.
So we worked there during the earnout period for several years, and great company. And they're still around today. I mean, obviously, Coldwell Banker is a brand name around
It
the
is.
horn. The title company still in existence, still a strong title company.
Can you say, for like someone that wants to build a brokerage and everything, like what the exit is like? Is it like a 6-figure exit or 7 figures? Like,
It really just depends on what you build.
yeah.
I mean, obviously, as large as we were here in South Central Pennsylvania, we certainly weren't the biggest, but it was a nice size. And in our market share in each county, we were in the top 3.
Yeah.
We were number 1 in a couple of them, but
Wow.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
but it was but the so we did that, and then we worked for the company. The company that owned us was a big Fortune 500 company,
Okay.
and the corporate stuff wasn't really, you have to have process and procedures, and you have to have things in place, but red tape after a while gets old. So
It does.
I knew it wasn't where I was going to end up. Had a non-compete to ride out for a few more years, and wanted to make sure I honored that.
Mhm.
And so we actually had a flip business on the side. It was small. There was basically one guy doing it. We kind of turned it. We're like, hey, we're just going to put this thing on steroids and see where it goes. So we ended up flipping for a few years there. I mean, sheriff sales was kind of our game because I had the legal background to make sure the title was good. We put a process and procedure in place to handle sheriff sales.
Yeah.
There was still a lot of properties you could buy at the time, not like today where
It's hard to come by a deal
Yeah.
these days.
very hard to come by. And it's very hard to come by on the sheriff sales list. I mean, I was talking to a buddy that was at the Cumberland sale. I haven't been to one in a while. And he's like, yeah, there was 11 properties and there's 150 people there.
Yeah,
So,
that's crazy.
so it's totally different. I mean, so we were doing that for a while. We were doing about somewhere between 60 and 100 properties a year.
Wow.
Wow.
Flipping
pretty large
wise.
scale.
So it was
Yeah.
it was big. And then the sheriff sale, that was our niche. I mean, there were a lot of people doing the SEO stuff and buying direct,
Yeah.
but sheriff sales was our thing. That started to dry up for a multiple number of reasons. It was basically, hey, there's so many investors. They're paying crazy money. In my opinion, sometimes they're paying fair market value for stuff, and you couldn't necessarily compete. They had different models. They were looking at necessarily not flipping, but they were buy and holds. And hey, I love the neighborhood, and I have 3 apartments down the street, so I want to buy these things. So, that part of it started to slow down. We expanded into, I think we're at the end in 10 or 11 counties. We started in like 4 counties, all the way to Montgomery County and Franklin County on, Montgomery on the east and Franklin on the west, and then up and down to the, it just got tighter and tighter. We saw the market tightening up, and it's just kind of like we were talking about beforehand. You kind of have to, in real estate, you kind of have to go in a direction that the market allows.
Yeah. And one of our core values within the company is adaptability.
Yeah, you have to be in this business.
And that's something that we just recently added to because we realized, I mean, we've only been in the business a little over 2 years now. And just in that short period of time, we've already seen such huge change. It's like we have to, add this as a core value, let our employees know, listen, like our goals before are not necessarily our goals anymore just because the circumstances have changed so much.
The circumstances really do change in this business on a regular basis, whether it's brokerage world, whether it's title, whether it's wholesaling or flipping. I mean, you just kind of have to go where the business allows you to go, depending what's going on. So, and that's what we did. So, the whole intention was to get back into the title business at some point in time, or, I thought I'd probably end up back in it because it's one of those things that, it's kind of like you guys, when the real estate's in your blood, it's hard to get away from it.
You
So,
start getting the itch.
and, it's something I knew well. I had a lot of experience in. And so when the non-compete expired, Jolene George and Ryan Hess and I decided, hey, we're going to open a company. And our intention was really at the time to be like a boutique title company. We were, we knew we could pull a few clients, and it kind of just really grew in the matter of months beyond our expectations. Which we're really blessed that happened, and now we're just kind of riding the wave and doing that.
I think that's honestly, you guys grew so fast because you already had such knowledge going into the different forms of investing and how these investors are approaching these deals and the different kind of exit strategies they could be looking at. It's like you've already done this in the past and you do it yourself. So you already had like a great understanding just how to help the investors out genuinely.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, even when we were doing sheriff sales, we were selling searches to our competitors, and we were sitting beside them, and but it was, we could do the title searches, and we could also, it was friendly competition.
Right.
And when we did open, we did have a book of business from the investor side, because everybody that we knew, they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll use you guys.
Absolutely.
So it really worked out well.
Now, I'm curious, so what year did you guys officially start? And then how did you, Jolene, and Ryan all meet and come together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I always like to ask, like, how does everybody get into title? How's
Mhm.
everybody get into real estate? You know,
Yeah.
because usually it's not just, hey, this is what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Right.
Very few people just end up there.
Especially finding the right partner too.
It's
Like
very
business partners are
difficult.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when I went to Caldwell Banker in 2011, Ryan Hess and Quentin Miller were the owners of the company. Jolene was on board with them in the title operation for about a year. So, Ryan Q, as we call him, and
Mhm.
we really kind of like what you talked about. Um, we were really good because Q was very operational.
Mhm.
Ryan was very, direction, goal oriented, and kind of a CEO mindset,
Like a visionary.
visionary. I was somewhere in between, and I could do the title stuff,
Mhm.
and I was an attorney, so it
Yeah.
was a piece they didn't have. So we kind of really meshed really really well.
Mhm.
Just like the two of you were talking about, like, hey, I pick up the ball here, and this is my strength, and this is my weakness. So it really worked out. Really, really well. And we grew that obviously pretty quickly in a few years then as well. They owned that company since 2008. They built the foundation. They were really the drivers there.
Yeah.
And then the three of us coming together was just a good combination.
Nice.
So Jolene was there. She is amazing at what she does in
Mhm.
title. I mean, she's been working in title since 15 or 16
Wow.
years old, because her mom was also with us,
Oh,
so she
okay.
Mhm.
learned it from her mother.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I mean, we worked really well together. She was very good on the operational side, and
That's awesome.
that's kind of how we met. And
Mhm.
when the non-compete expired, I was kind of like, hey, what are we going to do? Am I getting back into title? Do you
Right.
guys want to do something?
Yeah.
And
Are you allowed to disclose how long that non-compete was for?
I am allowed to disclose that, but not much more. But or I'd have to kill you.
Hey.
The It was 5 years.
Okay.
So
Wow.
yeah,
That's a long time.
yeah, it
Mhm.
was a long time. But yeah, hey, you're selling a company; they're paying you good money,
Of
and
Yeah.
course.
yeah. So yeah, the break in the flipping, coming into the flipping for a while was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was exciting.
Kind of scale that a little bit more
Yeah,
during that time.
and scaling that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And building it, but
So for
yeah.
Capstone, do you guys have an exit strategy, or has that been brought to the table yet? You guys continue to
No,
just keep
no
growing?
exit strategy. I mean, I'm only 50. I consider that young.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we are building it. We are looking for other leaders to come in, because it is, we're doing 250 to 300 transactions a month now,
Wow.
Oh, a month.
and
I was ready for a year. A month
yeah.
is
So we
that's
do
insane.
recognize we need a few good leaders to come in. So we're
Mhm.
we're in the search of
Yeah.
those individuals right
Yeah.
now. But the goal is to grow it steadily,
Mhm.
and focus on a few geographic areas as well
Yeah.
that we're
Okay.
not in now. Yeah.
Gotcha. So I want to dive into. Let's see, we're at 23 minutes, pretty much. Yeah, this should last us a while. So,
Okay.
as you know, you and your company had sent out an email. Was that
Mhm.
about a month ago? A little over
Yeah,
a month
about
ago.
that. Yeah.
Pretty much going over the new guidelines and the new bills,
Mhm.
as far as wholesaling, all the restrictions, the guidelines behind it,
Mhm.
POA, double closes, subject twos, novations,
Mhm.
transactional funding, like everything's changing.
It
So
is.
let's
Mhm.
just start with one at a time, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So rumor has it that in order to wholesale any kind of real estate in Pennsylvania now, you must be licensed.
So
Is that
not
accurate?
yet,
Not
but
yet,
it,
but
but
it's
it's coming.
coming.
There was a new law passed in it was about a month or two ago now that the
Yeah.
new law was passed, and coming in January, you're going to have to be licensed. I mean,
Okay.
the wholesaler is defined under the Real Estate Licensing Act now.
Mhm.
Basically says, hey, if you're a wholesaler, you have to be licensed. There's some things that haven't been necessarily figured out yet. Like,
Yeah.
so, hey, if the company has a licensed real estate agent, your LLC, for an example, has a licensed real estate agent in
Right.
the company, is that one person enough? as an
Right.
example?
Or does it
Can
need
you
to be
still have
everybody?
employees that are knocking on the doors? My take on that is probably enough as long as the licensed person is signing
The
the
documents.
contract.
Okay.
But again, that's still not really, there's still some things there that aren't really
Yeah.
known.
Mhm.
Why do you think they're bringing all these new rules and restrictions into our market?
I think I mean, from my standpoint, they're looking at consumer protection.
Mhm.
So, the little old lady that signed over her house to someone, and the
Right.
guy made $200,000 on it, and she really didn't necessarily understand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like anything else.
Like there's morals that has to be included in the business, and
There is.
obviously there's some people that won't follow that.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
it's like anything else. It's like attorneys, it's like realtors, it's like any profession. There's good and bad ones out there.
Yeah.
And I think really it's like, again, these most laws come from somebody doing something, either pushing morality
Mhm.
or pushing the limits and upsetting the wrong person.
Yeah.
And, I think that's what happened here is, hey, look, we just need to make sure these things, the government's looking at it from a perspective of, hey, we need to make sure these things are regulated, they're taken care of, people are doing the right thing,
Mhm.
Right.
and, there's no abuse happening. So it just takes one bad apple.
And it does happen. Like,
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, we've been in a couple scenarios. I'll say one specifically. I'm not going to name
Mhm.
who the company was because they are well known around here. There was I had got a probate lead, I want to say about 2 months ago, and I was very familiar with this property. It was actually located directly behind my girlfriend's.
Okay.
So I was like, I know this market, I know ARV, like I know what this house can sell for. Pretty much, he had given me a call on a Saturday, and the situation was that his brother was the owner of this property, and he was the beneficiary,
Mhm.
right? So he, 88 years old, had no understanding of the market whatsoever, and he pretty much like over the phone was like, "No, like I want a price." And I was like, "I know the property, I understand it's not in the best condition whatsoever, but I was like, I can give you, I think my number was like 100 and roughly like 65,000 to
Mhm.
180,000, right?" He was like, "That seems high. Like, that seems like more than it's worth." I was like, "No." I was like, "I'm more than willing to pay that most likely." I was like, "Is there any way I can go check it out?" He was like, "Yeah, the back door should be open. My brother had passed away. Fireman broke in. Back door's still open. Go, feel free to take a look around." It's like, "Okay."
The fireman broke in?
Police, ambulance,
Okay,
whatever.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I was like, oh, it's burned out.
No, it was ambulance, or police. So I went over there, I took a look, and I was like, it's exactly what I expected. I was like, this property needs $30,000 to $40,000. ARV is like 300 to 330 at
Oh,
this
wow.
point. Exactly. So I was like, there's a huge margin there. So I go back to him. I was like, listen, I was like, I'll give you 180 like today. Are you good to sign? And then he was like, no. He was like, I need to think about it some more. I could tell like there was something skeptical going on. So I called Stefanie. I was like, listen, we have this amazing lead. I just checked out the house. Fantastic. He's not signing. I need to figure out why. Act as a third party. You don't know me.
Mhm.
Figure out what's going on, right? So she calls him. Turns out this other company actually already had it under contract with him. He was using me to vet their number.
Oh, gotcha.
Their number was significantly lower than what I had offered.
Mhm.
And that's why he had questioned my price so heavily, where it's
Yeah.
like they just took full advantage of this dude because he had no understanding. He was 88 years old, everything else. But for example, that's just one of those really bad apples that you get in the marketplace.
Mhm.
So that was a little bit irritating. I was like, and then what even pissed me off more is that we were like, listen, like I know what you got this property for. Will you wholesale it to us with like a $65,000 assignment?
Mhm.
And they're like, yeah. We'll actually, like, we'll do that. It's like, okay, because we're still, we're only looking to make 30 to 40 on a flip, especially if it's just
Mhm.
cosmetic like this. It's nothing major. So it comes to day of closing, we get our funds all situated and everything, and they're like, actually, we're gonna keep it. We're like, we're on our way to the title company to meet you right now. Like, what are you talking about? We need the assignment agreement. Are you?
Did you have it under agreement?
No, but
Oh.
it was all through text. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna send it. We're gonna send
Well,
it.
they
When
told
you-
us make sure we have everything in place, and we did, and we showed them.
we got
we did.
insurance, everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
And then ended up screwing us. So I was like, not only did you guys steal this property from them, and then you just screwed us in the end
Yeah.
because we already took so much time, getting everything set up. So one of those bad apples for sure. But you
Yeah.
definitely run into them.
Yeah,
Like,
you definitely do.
yeah.
And it's because of those situations that the law had to get passed. And, I think there's some good things about it. there's some things that like in the law, it has a 30-day rescission period for the buyer,
I wanted to ask about this.
I feel like
which
that's bad though.
which I do. I mean, I think it's so like cars, and other things in other states, they do have rescission periods for certain things. Like we do a refinance. There's a 3-day right of rescission period for the client to decide, hey, no, this probably isn't the right thing for me, and they can rescind.
Okay.
30 days though, I mean,
That's extensive.
that's
Yeah.
extensive. And
That's usually the length of the contract.
it's usually the length of the contract. I'm not sure how it's all going to play out from the practical sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually said to one of my colleagues, I'm like, hey, this bill's probably going to get pushed through. I do think it's going to get knocked down to like 5 days or 3 days or something like
Hope
that,
so.
which seemed reasonable. Like, hey, they have a rescission period, They talk to their son, they talk to their daughter, and they're like, hey, you might want to reconsider this or whatever.
Right.
But
Yeah.
30 days, like from a wholesaler standpoint, I don't know how that it's going to work.
Because the buyer, say you do get that buyer and you're wholesaling the deal, the buyer could just go behind your back and go directly to the seller, and then you're just cut out.
They can go to the seller, they can cut you out that way. They
Yeah.
can go to, they could sign 10 agreements to
Yes.
sell the
Sure.
property,
Yeah.
and they
The
can
contract
be,
means nothing at
the
that point.
contract. The contract means nothing. They can rescind them all except for the one they want to keep in the end. I mean, they
Yeah.
can meet
Right.
with. So
So for our audience, just real quick to
Mhm.
simplify that.
Sure.
What is a rescission period?
So a rescission period is a time a consumer has to basically decide, hey, they don't want to move forward with the contract, and they can just sign a termination, a rescission,
Yep.
and walk away from the contract like it didn't exist.
Right. Okay.
Now, I feel like let's take a step back and focus on assignments.
Sure.
So basically, assignments can still happen as long as you're licensed and everything. But now, instead of it showing on the HUD on the buyer's side, it goes on the seller's side.
Yeah, so I will preface this by saying, so not only is the Attorney General and the government looking at things, but our title insurance underwriters are looking at these transactions. And everything comes in waves. So,
Yeah.
this happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, whatever the date was, and now we're back
Oh, really?
to yeah, it's
I didn't know about this.
it's been there before. And so the underwriters are looking at it and they're like, okay, look, you can handle these transactions, but you have to have some safeguards in place.
Yeah.
And some of there's things that are black and white, and there's some of those safeguards that are kind of gray. Like, what does this mean?
Right.
So we can handle assignments. Keep in mind that technically under the way the real estate transfer tax law was written, and this is where novations come into play, is that if you assign a property, technically you owe real estate transfer tax on both transactions. So A to B and A to C technically have to pay transfer tax.
For a double close.
No, for
For
an
the
assignment.
assignment.
That's what I was gonna. Yeah.
For specifically, I mean, in Pennsylvania. So this is Pennsylvania specific, by the way. I should
Right.
be clear about that.
Yeah.
So technically, there's transfer tax due on both. But what you can do is you can enter into a novation. You can cancel out the first contract, enter into the second contract, and at that point in time, there's only one contract that exists: the real estate realty transfer tax. Department of Revenue has said, hey, look, that's fine. You can do that. And there's only one real contract. You only have to pay one set of transfer taxes.
Right.
So, that's one piece of the assignment situation.
Gotcha.
Now, going over to the double close side of things, I think I read something in the email where it basically said if you do double close, whether that's an hour later or the next day later, the seller still needs to know how much you made on that profit.
Yeah. So before I get into that, if I will, because I don't think I answered your question fully about how it's going to be shown on the settlement statement.
Oh, yeah. I
So
forgot,
I forgot about it too.
We're jumping ahead.
I went down a rabbit hole there. So, the whole premise of the law and what our title insurance underwriters want to make sure of is that there's full disclosure.
Okay.
That's the bottom line.
Right.
Like if everybody has full disclosure and everybody's signing off, everything's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody needs to know what's going on.
Right.
So when you're doing an assignment transaction, really what needs to be set up, and every title agency may decide differently on how they want to handle it, but I can tell you the underwriters have said, look, it has to be disclosed. Um, so if you use the final purchase price and you put your fee on the seller's side, seller's signing off on that document. That document, they can review it. It's Every title company goes through that with all their clients. And they can see, hey, this is the fee. I understand. Hey, they ended up selling it for this.
Right.
And I always use the example because, again, we did mostly sheriff sales, but we did talk to people. They would come to us, and I would always be like, hey, look, I could list your property for this right
Right.
now. Hey, yes, I could buy it from you. It's going to require work and my time and, the cost of money and everything else. I can buy it from you for this. Um, Understand, I could make a profit of $1,000. I may lose money, or I may make $100,000 on this property.
Yeah.
And that's how I always just walked everybody through it. Like, hey, there's full disclosure. They know,
That's a good way to put it too.
That's what we do. Honestly, we give them
Yeah.
options, whatever best fits your, option there. Just choose that.
Yeah, because it's not one size fits all.
Right. Situations can vary so much where it's
Yeah.
like somebody might be urgent to sell, like they need to get it done in a quick time frame in which you can get a little bit more of a discounted property, or they could be looking for a higher price. You're like, okay, it might take me a little bit longer, but I'll get you this higher price going through a novation,
You got it.
or whatever the situation might be.
And it's again, full disclosure, like the consumer protection side is basically saying, hey, there's got to be full disclosure. The title insurance underwriters are saying, hey, it's got to be full disclosure. If there is, it's no problem. We can
Yeah.
do this transaction. And I know there's people out there, like you said, like they don't want to disclose because they're afraid the seller's going to say, hey, well, you're making $40,000, $50,000, $70,000 on this transaction.
Right.
I just don't feel right about it. And that's what everybody's concerned about. I mean, my opinion is you have that discussion up front
Right.
and nip it in the bud.
It's true. But now the issue I think runs into where, sure, you're getting a property under contract for wholesale. You think you can sell it for this much. You're not guaranteed that price whatsoever. You're like, okay, I will go ahead and have this discussion with the seller up front. Be like, listen, obviously, I'm an investor. I'm here to make money. I don't plan on purchasing this property, but, I have some investors who might be interested. I will go ahead and charge them a fee on top of our agreed upon price. You get to the closing table and you might not have an exact number for that seller at
Correct.
the time. Where like, okay, I might make 10, I might make 15, 20, whatever the number is. You get to the closing table, you're like, oh, I ended up selling it for $32,500, like more than, that guaranteed price. But you still have that 30-day period now. Well, it's not in place yet, but possibly you'll have that 30-day period. If you hit that closing table within that 30 days, you can be at the closing table and the
They
seller
can
could
rescind.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like at the closing table.
At
you're
the
like,
closing table.
Wow.
which then also in turn though screws over the buyer because they already went through, they got the financing in place, they have their workers ready to move on it, they've set time aside, they set funds aside, like insurance, everything getting prepared, utilities switched over. It's like it just runs in, it's so difficult.
So
at this point.
I understand that there's a group being formed to try to push back on this and get that amended.
Okay.
I don't know. And again, this is all hearsay
Right.
through the grapevine.
It's not official yet.
It's not official, but I mean, I do think the 30-day rescission period really doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I can understand like 3 to 5 days.
Yeah, I can totally understand 3 to 5 days as well. But 30 days, I don't know. It really creates, in my opinion, it creates chaos in the industry because there's a need for what you guys do. Like these properties are, most of the time, they need work. There's a hoarder living in them. They're never going to clean them out, whatever it may be.
Right.
They need to be turned over.
Yeah.
And
divorce,
I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, but there's certainly a need for what's being done. This creates, frankly, a little bit of chaos in the industry because of everything that we just talked about. I mean, they could rescind at the table.
Yeah.
I mean, they could, sign 10 contracts.
Yeah.
Right.
On the title side, some of the wholesalers we work with, we're doing They basically say, hey, we're going to go sell this property. Can you just get the title work done so we know what's there and we're ready to close?
Right.
We don't always, the buyer chooses, we don't
Mhm.
always get the transaction, but there's work being done not only on your part, a tremendous amount on your part as
Yeah.
investors, but also on the title company's end and everything else. So like if you get to the closing table, like
So
everybody's
you
done
guys
all
already
this
did all your
work.
work as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody's done all the work. And so
And the
here we
seller
are.
sees you made an extra 5 or 10,000 on it, and they're just like, oh no, never
Yeah, I
mind.
mean,
Mhm.
it just and it creates another opportunity for them to negotiate. Frankly,
Yeah.
I think it comes down to just building those right relationships. Number one, being transparent, but
being transparent. Yeah,
building those right relationships to build that trust for them not to do that.
Yeah.
too. But it's horrible that
Yeah,
you know.
I'm glad it hasn't passed yet, but
Yeah.
at the same time,
well,
so
the
you
law
guys
has passed. It just hasn't been enforced.
enforced yet.
It's it's
Okay.
6 months. So January, it's like a Saturday for at the beginning of January.
Yeah.
That it kicks in.
So
So
you guys already put these in place and everything just to be prepared for when that does happen.
well, we put them in place because of our underwriters saying, hey, these are the requirements,
Oh,
like full
okay.
disclosure. So we can talk about like, the double close, I think was the next thing you
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
bringing up there. So the double close scenario and, just to, you would, as the investor would buy the property and then you sell it an hour later, 4 hours later, a day later, a week
Yeah.
later, a month later. So our title insurance underwriters have basically said, hey, you as the agent have to police this. And, we expect you to take a look at this. You can't do double closes unless, and again, this is the thing, we can do them. All parties have to know what's going on. So what that means is the seller, frankly, it means the seller needs to know what you're selling the property for. So there has to be that disclosure.
Right.
If there's that disclosure, we can do them, back to back. That's not an issue.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like you might as well just do
So-
an assignment.
right.
So my question
Yeah.
there then, it would be if you go ahead and let's say you're getting a property at a price, just because we have experience, we understand what a good deal looks
Mhm.
like and what it doesn't look like. Let's say that we run across what is a good deal, right? And we understand that in our minds, we're going to do a double close with this.
Mhm.
If there's some reason we're unable to do an assignment, right? So we go ahead, we get the funds in place, we go ahead and purchase this property. Let's say we don't have an end buyer at the
Mhm.
end of the day. Do we still then have to disclose? Because at this point, it's like, okay, we could keep this property, refi it out, keep it and everything.
Great question.
So that it might be one of those gray areas like you were discussing.
Well,
But-
go ahead.
But yeah, no. So let's say a month later we plan on keeping it, but somebody comes in and offers us 30,000 more than we paid. We obviously still have private money on that, so we're like, sure, like we go ahead and do that. Technically, at that point, it's double close almost.
Mhm.
But it's such a
So
So-
I would say to that, that is okay. That's perfectly fine.
okay.
It's so, and on, South Carolina, I believe, is one of the states that passed some of these laws that are
Yeah.
even more stricter than ours.
Yeah.
And in that state, they basically said, hey, you can't have another contract in place to sell this property.
Is there a seasoning period?
So there's you can't have an assignment in place or a contract in place, or you did a novation prior to the double close,
Okay.
whatever, or if you're double closing,
Yeah.
you can't already have another agreement in your back pocket.
Yeah.
And I would even go so far as to say, that's probably a good rule. Like, do you have that agreement already signed?
Right.
And if you have, well, then you have to disclose.
Right. Okay.
And I think that's a pretty clear from consumer protection and underwriters, from their safeguard protection side.
Right.
That's probably a good rule. Like if you already have it under you bought it, it's under contract for you to purchase, and you already have it under contract.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it needs
That's
to be
probably a
disclosed.
clear. That's when it needs to be disclosed.
Right.
Now, if you're waiting a reasonable period,
Who's to say what that is?
who's?
but-
I think.
Yeah. Is there like a max limit for a double close?
I would say 4 weeks is probably a good
indicator.
clear
Yeah.
guideline. I've talked to our underwriters, and they keep calling it a reasonable period, and I'm like, well, you got to tell me what that is.
What is the
Right.
reason?
So they basically said, hey, a month
Mhm.
seems reasonable.
Okay.
And even if you don't have it under contract, but you have a guy that says, hey, I'm buying that, I'll buy it from you for 150. You bought it for 100.
Mhm.
Right.
Even if you just have that kind of oral statement, you're probably pushing it. But the written
Right.
line, like, hey, if you have you have the contract for you to buy it and the other contract already signed,
Mhm.
I would say that's a disclosure. Hey, you got to disclose it, or you have to wait 4 weeks.
Just close
Close
in
it.
31 days.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it has to be reasonable to some extent. So,
Right.
and like I said, South Carolina has basically said you can't have that second contract. You can't even market it.
Yeah.
You can't even go and market the property.
Do you know what their time frame is?
No, well, they basically said, hey, you can't have a contract and you can't even market it. Like, you can't even tell your friends
You
that
can't
That's
sell
crazy.
your
You
house.
can't
Like,
sell
that's
your
crazy.
house.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they're going to police that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how that, I don't know if those guidelines are going to stand up to the scrutiny of courts when it happens,
Mhm.
but that's how far that they've gone. So
Yeah.
Pennsylvania didn't go as far as some of these other states.
Wow. Now, so we touched on.
I want to bring up POA.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna bring up novations.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because that kind of
goes in line.
intertwines.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, how can we handle novations now?
I don't think novations really change.
I saw you sent a new document for innovation.
Did I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
like
had
one of
I had a sample one out there. The novation side of it, I don't think really. You're still you're probably going to fall under the wholesaler definition.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think you have to be licensed, or your company has to be licensed.
Mhm.
That'd be this one.
And okay, yeah, and I think the big thing with that is I don't think anything how it happens changes.
Mhm.
I don't think the title changes. With our novations, we always have all 3 parties sign.
Yeah.
So then,
Right.
You have full disclosure. Most of our novations that we see kind of outline what price, the middleman, so to speak, the wholesaler is getting paid. The novator is getting paid. However you want to look at that.
The brewer method.
Yeah. And it's outlined. It's outlined in that novation.
Mhm.
And then all 3 parties sign off, including the seller.
Yep.
And then there's no questions. Hey, it's disclosed right in there.
Right.
And I think that solves part of the part of those challenges there.
So I feel like one of the issues that court systems might have been running into is that people are getting POA then doing novations. So
Mhm.
it's not even that you would have to disclose this to the seller of the property.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where those moral and ethical, they
Yeah.
start to play a factor.
So I would say this: POAs are being utilized. There's so much fraud out there in our industry, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Whether it's seller impersonation fraud, which I just dealt with a situation
Did you?
with that. They stole the real seller's licenses, social security numbers.
Oh my gosh.
It went to settlement. So we've seen some crazy stuff. Wire fraud is prevalent.
Yeah.
In the last 15 months, we've seen 3 fraudulent POAs being utilized,
Wow.
and these aren't
Notarized as well?
notarized.
Wow.
Well, they were notarized.
They got a stamp.
Mhm.
They got a
but-
stamp from Staples or online, and they made their own notary. So POAs generally for any transaction, forget about investing in wholesaling,
Mhm.
are really scrutinized these days by attorneys and title companies. And we always ask questions. Hey, why are they using this POA?
Right.
Like,
Right.
is there really a legitimate reason? At Capstone, we can do electronic notarizations now in most counties. So we can have the seller sign off early electronically. It's super secure. It's super safe. They have to show their ID. They have to do self-authentication, and basically questions come off of their credit report. So, there's questions you probably had from your bank.
Yep.
How old is what is the age range of your father?
What's
Did
your
you
dad's
own
middle
a
name?
Mitsubishi
Yeah.
Galant in 1992? That type
Right.
of thing.
Yeah.
So it is super safe and super secure, and we can do it anywhere in the world as long as it's the person is a U.S. citizen. So
Okay.
we've done electronic notarizations in Haiti,
Oh, wow.
all over Europe.
Yeah.
So you can do it anywhere. I even did one. Somebody's driving in their car on their iPhone down the main drag highway in California, and they're notarized. I asked them to pull over, but so you can do those anywhere. So there's a lot of things that you can do to avoid always using a POA. So because, and I wanted to start there. Number one, POAs are inherently risky because of the fraud scenario. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, my wife and I have POAs for each other. We give those, everybody gives POAs to someone to do something for, just in case something happens.
Right.
But it is risky. So then you roll in the investor world of POAs. And I think what you're referring to is the situations where someone does either a novation or an assignment and then takes a POA, like one of their company members is utilizing a POA
anybody.
themselves to use. I would, my advice is I think you're out of your mind to do that personally. There's just so much liability that comes with that.
Yeah.
I've actually had I had an investor friend of mine. He bought a property in West Virginia, and he bought it from a wholesaler.
Yeah.
And the wholesaler had the POA to notarize all the documents. The day before the settlement, the Attorney General's office came in and they had an injunction to keep all the. They allowed the settlement to go through, but they kept all the money, even though he did nothing wrong. In the end, nothing
It was
wrong.
just because he took POA.
The wholesaler had the POA
and
signed everything. And one of the family members said, "Hey, look, I just don't think this is right." I mean, the house was in complete disrepair.
Right.
I don't know the circumstances with the POA, etc. But bottom line is, it was held up for 2 years. He had private money on the transaction.
Wow.
He had to figure out a way to pay that back.
Yeah.
It was sitting out there. It was a big house. I mean, he made a ton of money on the property.
Yeah.
But he had to wait 2 years to get his money back before the court ruled on the scenario.
And typically on private money, you only have like a 12-month term.
Yeah. So he had to figure that whole thing out.
Yeah.
HELOC or something.
So, and he spent, I think he told me $70,000 on an attorney to.
Oh
wow.
goodness.
Yeah. So it's not cheap.
No.
And, why? My question is, why do it? Like, I understand convenience. I understand that. But when you have a financial interest in the outcome of a transaction, I don't think you can sign on behalf of the person that's selling you the property. I know there was a local transaction that happened recently, and I don't know if they ended up filing. I think they ended up working it out before they filed a complaint. But it does happen. I, encourage people not to do that.
Yeah.
And, again.
But that's just one of the new restrictions that's being put in place, though, is that POA isn't even a thing anymore, right?
There are people out there that allow them. There are people out there that utilize them. The law doesn't state that they cannot be utilized for these purposes.
Okay.
I just think it's
I just saw in your
It's
email.
weird. Like
it's we will not allow, we will not close transactions that's happening in.
Okay.
Everybody has to set their own standards. I do think it's incredibly dangerous to do that. I mean, at some point it's going to come back to bite you.
Yeah.
And again, the question is why? Just have the seller sign.
just tell them how much you're making. Right?
And like us at Capstone, we'll go to them and have them sign off. Like if they're incapacitated or it's green, they're in Greencastle, we'll go have them sign off. I mean, we'll send somebody. So there's plenty of ways to get the transaction done without incurring that additional
taking that control and taking
risk.
That
Yeah.
And most of the time, for us, like the sellers don't care what we make. Like they want us to make more, I guess, because we just built a really good relationship with them. So it's all about transparency.
It's about transparency, and you got to build that relationship. I mean, I think you're absolutely 100% right. So,
has anything changed in the realm of subject to?
Or creative financing?
Subject to, so what we do is, so I have subject to documents. I've created a package. They're few and far between, but people talk about them. I have seen them. We have closed on them. What we require is that the seller be represented by an attorney.
Okay. So,
and basically that is for the purpose of full disclosure. Seller knows what they're getting into, because subject to, especially in what we deal with mostly, all three of us, is the residential side. I mean, commercial's different,
Mhm.
but on the residential side,
Yeah.
there's a provision within all of those mortgages that say, hey, they call it the due on sale clause. You're probably familiar with it. That say, hey, if you transfer a financial interest in this property, we have the right to foreclose on you.
Did you hear
Wait, does
about
commercial have that too? You're saying or no?
Commercial's much different.
Okay.
They typically, it might even be more stringent depending on the circumstances. So if you're
Gotcha.
buying a property on the commercial end with an LLC, they
Mhm.
may say, hey, if you're fine, if structure of the ownership changes,
Mhm.
you have to notify us before it
Oh,
changes,
okay.
that type of thing. So from that standpoint, you just have to be careful, and you have to make sure that the seller understands what they're getting into.
Right.
Right. There was a new document I believe you came up with where it's like pretty much just stating exactly what you just said, where it's like, here's the risk that is
Yeah,
involved
here's
with
the
you doing
risk.
this. Have you heard of due on sale clause insurance by chance?
I have not.
So I heard about it a little while ago.
Really?
Apparently, there's now insurance companies who are offering due on sale clause insurance.
For subject to
I'm
transactions.
pretty sure.
Huh,
Yeah. So
interesting.
you aware of who Pace Morby is by chance?
No, I do not.
Big investor, all
Okay.
creative finance subject to, but that's where I had heard it from. And this was, I want to say, almost a year ago. So
Interesting.
whenever Stephanie and myself, we were like coming across a couple subject to deals, and we're
Mhm.
like, well, what if this happens? It's like, that's an option, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't really done too much
Interesting.
research
Well,
into
I'm
it.
curious. So,
Yeah, look.
I mean, look, as long as the payments are being made,
Right.
I think the risk is somewhat nominal. Now, when banks are sold, then you have to then
That's
they're
when-
looking at
yeah, through
everything
the
of that bank that
statements.
they acquired. Yeah.
Right.
So you do have that risk, and it's more of a seller's risk
Mhm.
than it is a buyer's risk. I mean, yes, you have the risk of the mortgage, the note being called
Yeah.
Right.
by the bank, but usually you can go out and refinance it or do something.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, the subject twos, because the rates went up, obviously subject twos came back in the marketplace
appealing.
again, and they're more
Yeah.
appealing, and
Yeah.
and it's definitely an avenue. There's nothing wrong with a subject to, again, as long as disclosure is made, and that's why to cover you as an investor,
Mhm.
to cover us as an attorney / title company, however, whatever role we're playing, I always think it's good, like back to the full disclosure situation, like, hey, you as the investor, all my investors know if they settle with us on subject to, we'll have everything done, paperwork done, everything would be buttoned up,
Mhm.
but they're going to have to make sure the seller has an attorney. And, we have people we can refer them to as an attorney to represent them. And, they're usually charging $500.
Yeah.
Usually the investor ends up paying that money.
Right.
But they're at least getting some guidance, and they understand the risk. Because, I mean,
Right.
if you as the investor stop paying, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying as an
Yeah.
investor,
Right.
Right.
stop making that payment on their mortgage, well, it affects their credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
they're
they're-
probably not in good credit state
To
as
begin
it
with?
is,
Right.
but it does affect their credit, among
Yeah.
other things. So,
Right. Subject to isn't something we've done yet personally.
Mhm.
It's been a couple options where a deal might have been good for a subject to, but we feel as though it is a little bit higher of a risk. And we
High
don't
risk.
really want to put
Yeah.
ourselves in that predicament where it's like we could screw somebody else over if we mess up in any kind of way.
Which that's not gonna happen.
No.
Yeah.
No,
I'll
but
put that out there.
I mean, like, let's can I just give a scenario
Yeah,
for a
go ahead.
second on
Yeah.
that? So,
Yeah.
like, what happens if you do a subject to, and 3 months later, the person decides, hey, wait a second, I think I don't really like the deal I just put together, or you do a subject to and you allow them to stay there for a certain period of time, or maybe lease back the property depending on the circumstances.
We've
And
run into that before too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they come back and say, hey, look, I don't, they go to get an attorney.
Yeah.
And even if they couldn't afford one, there's public service attorneys that will help them out, pro
Yeah.
bono attorneys. And then, like, you're getting sued even though you did everything right. So if you have that extra protection, like, I mean, it's $500 or a couple $100
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have an attorney review it for the seller, so that you're checking that box and they know what they're doing. I just
Right.
think taking that risk off the table is just worth its weight in
Yeah.
gold, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
I completely agree.
I think we covered everything. Is there anything we missed in regards to the laws? The new?
well, I mean, I know the law allows the buyer, or I'm sorry, the seller, the opportunity to do an appraisal.
Mm.
It doesn't really give a time frame in there, but it
Okay.
allows them to have the right to do an appraisal. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I just went back through the notes real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I saw in that document, 1 to 4 units are allowable for wholesale, but anything more is now not possible. Is that
No, I
accurate?
don't think. I think it's 1 to 4 units is what's regulated. They're basically trying to regulate the consumer marketplace. So over 4 units, it's typically considered commercial.
Right.
in most
so
part.
we can do everything we're doing now with commercial, right?
You can.
Oh,
Mhm.
So
wow.
regulations didn't change for that then.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Interesting.
cool.
So, but I
Okay.
mean, most of wholesaling, so to speak, happens in the residential world.
Yeah,
Right.
I
no,
mean,
for
it's
sure. It's pretty
yeah.
rare to actually find a decent commercial deal that you're still capable of wholesaling.
And
Mhm.
same with land. Would land be?
That's a good
No,
question.
so yeah, in the document it
Yeah.
stated anything under 1 unit or 1 whatever, however they worded it, was doesn't count. Anything over 4 doesn't count.
Yeah.
So I would
Mm.
think land would probably be.
I think land would fall into that. It's probably out of that.
The
Yeah. That
residential.
realm, yeah.
Okay.
Huh. All
That's
right.
good to know.
Sorry.
I think
Let's
we
see what else there is.
hit about everything.
Real estate license, transfer tax, wholesale.
While he goes through that, is there any
like?
like goals that Capstone's looking to hit, within the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, we're just looking to steadily grow and grab some good clients, and that we like working with us, and we like working with them, like you guys. And the investor side, obviously, we understand the investor world from your seat,
Yeah.
so we do look at it from that perspective, and we understand that hey, there's deals that need to be closed quick,
Yep.
and we can move pretty quick because we have title searchers on staff. So that makes us a little more limber and can operate quickly. I mean, we had a deal come in last Friday, and we're closing it tomorrow.
Wow.
Wow. That was
We don't
quick.
like to do that every time because it puts a lot of stress on everyone. But we can. Yeah. So our goal is to continue to grow. Continue to look for different geographic regions here that make sense.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay.
You have any other questions?
Not really. I mean, I was looking. So you've been in this game for a while,
Mhm.
attorney, title company. You've probably seen so many different scenarios. I was wondering if there's ever been like one story that really stood out to you, or just one situation that you've been in where it's like you still think about this.
There's so many.
I believe it. Like I was just curious if there's like one that's like
there's so many.
unbelievable.
There's so many. Besides the couple getting divorced, throwing stuff at the settlement table at each other. To
That what we experienced with the one guy.
Oh, was he there for that?
Yeah.
which one was that? Oh yeah,
with
the
Isaiah and-
oh yeah, that
oh
guy.
my goodness.
Yeah, he was
So-
like on the run.
It was so loud in there, and they were just going back and forth. It was
Yeah, what Stephanie's referring to is we had a gentleman come in. He was selling them the property, and
we were on the buyer's side.
was a joint
Isaiah was
venture.
on the
That's right,
seller's side
yeah.
doing
Yeah.
acquisitions.
and the guy was, he was on something.
Yeah.
He was out of his mind.
There's a story behind that guy.
Is there?
Yeah.
I didn't hear the story.
Just briefly, I was actually the one who did the acquisitions for that property initially. Went out there, checked it out. It was a fire damaged property. I was like, I don't think we have anyone who would really want this.
Mhm.
So we kind of ran numbers on it. We were like, we're going to pass on this one, right? And the guy was super sketchy. Like, we tried to negotiate price and everything with him. He was like, I want under the table, give me shoebox money.
In a paper bag.
Yeah, in
paper
20s
bag.
or something. Yeah, I remember.
Exactly. And he
Yeah.
wanted a new pair of shoes, too. He was
Mhm.
like, give me a fresh pair of Air Forces with it. I'm like,
Oh my.
all right, guy. Like, listen,
Yeah.
like, we'll figure something out, right? So went through negotiations, and eventually I just found out, realized this guy's crazy. He's a wacko.
It was crazy.
So I let it go. And then I see on Isaiah's Snapchat story, no joke, 2 months later, he's in that same property that I'm in. I'm like, is that, I think it was 504 Emerald Street.
Oh my God.
And then he was like, yeah, why? I was like, what are you doing? Like, are you getting that? He was like, I don't know. I'm still in negotiations with the guy. And then we started talking, and he was telling Isaiah the same thing he told me. I was like, listen, Stephanie and I actually have a buyer for this property. If you want to get it locked up, he can pay this much, get it for this, and we'll JV it. He was like, all right. So we end up moving on. He settles on that price with the buyer. And then I ended up meeting with the seller later on. It was still during this whole due diligence period. And then he was telling me, he was like, yeah, my son just raped his teacher down in North Carolina. Son's like in middle school, his
That's
teacher.
crazy.
And then he ended up getting a strangulation charge because he wrapped a phone cord around his wife's neck and started like choking her out. And then he had a warrant for his arrest and was on the run while he's going through this whole closing process with us and everything. And I'm like finding this out like as we're about to go to the closing table and the next couple days. I'm like, dude, I was like, can we just settle this? And you like need to get the
Yeah, well, I mean, he's one of the few people that I was
scared for
legitimately
Isaiah.
concerned
Yeah.
that we were going to have issues.
Yeah.
Like,
might have to call the cops on this.
Yeah,
I
I
thought like he
mean-
needed an escort out or something. 'Cause
Yeah.
I thought he was gonna follow him.
Oh yeah, didn't you wait or somebody waited till
No,
like he
I was
left?
out. I booked
You
it.
were out?
yeah, she was out of there.
I would too.
I mean, I have a concealed carry permit, and I tell you,
that was one of
next
those
time,
situations.
the second time he came into our office, because the first time he walked out.
Yeah, closing
Oh.
didn't happen the
Did
first
it-
time. It
yeah.
happened the second time.
Really? I didn't
Yeah,
know about
I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I got to make sure. Like, this guy's a little nuts.
Yeah. That was
Yeah.
smart to bring that day.
He was something. But yeah, we've seen some crazy stuff.
I'm sure
There's
you
no
have.
doubt. I
That's
mean,
insane.
yeah, but
Well, no, we really appreciate you having
Yeah,
on.
thanks
for
coming
it was
on.
fun.
And after January, once everything gets settled, we'll have to bring you back in to just
See where the-
the
see-
gray areas.
Yeah,
ended
yeah,
up
see where
landing.
everything lands. And
Absolutely.
I'm really hopeful that the 30-day rescission period.
I hope so too. That's like the biggest one.
Yeah.
I'm not against wholesalers getting the license whatsoever. Everyone
Mhm.
needs to have a better understanding
Yeah.
of real estate as a whole before you're jumping into something like this.
Yeah.
Because you see those little clips on TikTok and Instagram where it's like, make $10,000 in 30 days doing
Yeah.
this. And it's like, you don't know all the details behind that. You don't
Yeah.
know.
All the work that goes into it.
Oh my
and
gosh, yes.
Relationship building and everything else.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So I'm not against that whatsoever. And everything else seems pretty straightforward. It's just disclose everything. You know,
Disclose.
Be very,
I mean, that's
very
it.
transparent with the buyer, the seller. Make sure transfer tax is equal. POA. Don't take advantage of somebody.
Yeah.
30
Make
day-
sure your documentation's good and solid. I mean, that's I know
Yeah.
it's those things that we I mean, you as an investor or me as an investor, sometimes you're like, oh, yeah, well, we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
just making sure that paperwork's solid, and there's no, because it makes it easier.
Yeah.
So
And
For
make
sure.
sure you have the right title company. So if you guys
Yeah.
are in Central PA, or you guys
Thank you,
cover
sir.
all PA, right?
yeah, we cover all PA.
Yeah.
If it's a residential deal in Pittsburgh or Philly, we have people we've referred out to that
Okay.
specialize in those areas, but pretty much South Central PA, all the way north. We cover all of Pennsylvania.
Awesome. So we'll make sure to leave Capstone Land Transfer's information down below if you guys are looking for an investor-friendly real estate company, or if you guys are just looking to buy your first house or whatever the case may be, so you guys can reach out to them. But with that being said, we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, thanks.
Peace.